Hello everyone. In case you missed the last video, I did a tour of our new place, just the media room in the library upstairs, and asked if people wanted to see VHS videos, because those were not stored in the media room or the library. Those were in a separate room in the house and not really on display, so to say, more stored. So there was interest, and I'm going to be doing a series of VHS videos. Today I just wanted to talk a little bit about VHS memories, why I still have VHS tapes, that type of thing, while there are actually a handful of tapes I'm looking to collect still. And then we'll be going through the collection in videos to come. I'm going to break it down into smaller chunks so it's not one long thing. So VHS, just in general, you know what the format is. I'm not going to go through a history lesson or the VHS beta wars or anything like that. There's so much of that on YouTube everywhere. I just want to talk a little bit more on a personal level of what the interest is in VHS for me, and I'd love to hear whether you're a person who grew up with VHS or you're someone who's maybe just a teenager and is collecting a VHS, because that does happen. I think a lot of people don't realize that. We sell a decent amount of VHS and we find it on our eBay store, and a lot of times it is actually younger people getting into a retro format, and I think part of that's because there's a big 80s craze going on with different shows, like Stranger Things is an obvious example, but I think a lot of 80s culture is still very relevant and has kind of had a resurgence in the past decade or so. But yeah, VHS, I am someone who did grow up with VHS. I watched VHS from the time I was a little kid, being a family had a bunch of tapes, all the way until I was getting into high school by the time it started transitioning over to DVD, and it took like a year or two where I'd start buying most stuff as it came out on DVD instead of VHS, but every once in a while you find a VHS of a movie that's older you just didn't have a copy of yet, and it was kind of the in-between period for a few years. So being 32 going on 33, VHS was the format that I watched things on for about half my life, just about half of my life. It really was the thing. We weren't a beta household. I didn't really know many people that were into that format, or they'd switched over to VHS a long time ago. Didn't know anyone really who had Laserdiscs. Really was the format that everyone had that I was around growing up, and it's what we had as a family. So VHS holds a lot of memories for me because of that. I mean, if you're with something that is a part of your life for roughly half of your life to this point, it's going to leave a mark. It's going to have some sort of importance to you, whether it's just nostalgic importance or a lot of memories. And one set of tapes we'll talk about in this one that I'll go over again in another video when we talk about more of the collection, talking about those memories. My dad died a few years ago, and he didn't really leave much of anything to remember him by as far as anything material. You may obviously have memories, obviously you have pictures and things like that, but he had moved to another country, hadn't spoken to him in a while, and when he died there just wasn't really anything tangible aside from old photographs, except the couple of things that he gave me before he moved. So they're very important to me, and they happen to be VHS tapes. As an odd thing, he still had in a handful of tapes that are just his favorite tapes. I mean, one that is one of the very few VHS tapes I own that is completely worn to the point where it's unwatchable. I think higher quality tapes, especially 80s tapes or tapes that are really taken care of, last a lot longer than people realize. VHS does wear down with use, but I think it's given more of a bad rap than it deserves. But yeah, that's a bit of an aside. But my dad's Peter Sellers VHS, if I can get them all up here without any of them falling out of the sleeves. But yeah, I'll go through these here. And those, again, have a memory attached to them because those were something that I grew up watching and loving because they were movies my dad watched all the time, and they were his personal VHS tapes, and he had very few that he kept. And yeah, just getting those as a hand-me-down and then him dying a few years later makes these fairly important to me. The one that he just wore the heck out of was the Movies on Parade version of The World of Henry Orient, which I have this on Laserdisc now for myself, but yes, that one, The Small Show on Earth. This one I actually picked up, added on here because his was like destroyed, but Casino Royale, so that was one I added later on, just in the Peter Sellers thing here. The Party, and then the Pink Panther movies. The Pink Panther, Shot in the Dark, Return, Strikes Again, Revenge, and Son of. So those are important tapes to me, and it has to do a lot with, I really love 80s and 90s, partially from growing up there, partially from just a lot of my favorite movies and TV shows come from that period. There's stuff from every decade, going from Clara Bow in the 20s up till current movies now that I like, but I do have a preference for 80s and 90s stuff. And a lot of interesting things with VHS, some movies that weren't put on other formats, or the only other release is, say, a Laserdisc that is maybe hard to get your hands on. It's just something where there's some rare things and some beautiful box sets that I really just like the art for. But yeah, it's really, that's why I like VHS, is just this emotional connection to certain things. And it's not like I'm going to get every movie that I like that's on VHS. It takes up way too much room. I'm not going to have an insane VHS collection in my own video store. But just certain things, and that leads me to how our VHS collection that Amanda and I have is very different from what we had growing up. Because growing up, obviously, the family had tapes. It wasn't really our tapes personally until we were a little bit older and earning our own money and buying movies. So a lot of the Disney, a lot of favorite movies we ended up growing up with, we never had copies of. And it just depends on what it is, whether or not we want to actually have a copy in our collection. Disney, again, I'll mention just because I was talking about it, is one where we just have a couple special releases or things that we just held on to. Because those are movies that we either have or are going to have on Laserdisc, DVD, and Blu-ray. Do I really need to use up the space for a VHS version of that? All those, Diamond Collection clamshells? No, don't need to use up all that space. Other stuff can go there, or like things that the kids want. Don't need all that. So it's very different because there were those family tapes, and then a lot of the tapes that I had that I bought for myself, say, with Christmas money or allowance or whatever, in elementary school, middle school, that type of age. A lot of those I sold off in the early 2000s when DVD was coming around to get DVDs and like PlayStation 2 games and things like that. So a lot of that I sold off too. So our collection is so very different. We were talking about that one night a while ago, how different what we have is from what we grew up with on VHS. There's still a lot of similar tapes, but just the general makeup of it is fairly different. And why we decide to put in our VHS collection what we decide to put is things individually that have a lot of memories for us. So that's just a brief discussion of why I have an interest in VHS and why I keep VHS and kind of what our collection is made of, why it is the way it is. So moving into the next video, I'm kind of breaking it down into different categories based on how much I have and things like that. So the next video I'm going to go into one of the largest categories, and that'll be Star Trek.